On behalf of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, I would like to welcome you to our 10th anniversary conference. I would now like to invite Professor Kishore Mahbubani, Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, to give his welcome remarks. Professor Mahbubani, please.
Professor Wang Gangbu, Chairman of the Governing Board of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, Mr. Giorgio, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and especially to our 10th anniversary celebrations. I hope you all enjoyed some of the parallel sessions that we had this morning. We wanted to have a festival of ideas, and I guess we've had it already before coming here. Now, for the regulars, I'm sure you will not be surprised if you hear that, as usual, I'll make 3 points. Firstly, I'll talk about how far the school has come in 10 years. Secondly, I'll talk about our 10th anniversary celebrations. And then thirdly, I'll have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Mr. Giorgio. Now, to illustrate how far our school has come in 10 years, let me share 10 facts with you in the hope that you'll remember at least 5 of them when you leave here. The first fact is that we are the only school of public policy to be blessed with a message from the Prime Minister of Singapore. Please go to our website. He says, and I quote, preparing public officers to lead and serve their countries is a challenging but also a fulfilling mission. I'm confident that the LKY School will deliver to its students an outstanding public policy education, provide them with the skills, knowledge, and values to become the agents of change and progress within their workplaces, communities, and countries, unquote. We are delighted to have this message from the PM on our website. And the PM personally can speak with great conviction about the value of public policy education, since he himself was a graduate from a sister school of public policy, the Harvard Kennedy School. And indeed, when I asked my counterpart, the dean of the Harvard Kennedy School, I said, if you had to name your most famous graduates from the Harvard Kennedy School, he often mentions the Prime Minister of Singapore as number 1 on his list. The second fact is that our budget has grown 10 times, from $5 million annually in 2004 to $50 million in 2014. That indicates how much the school has grown in 10 years. The third fact is that our number of our students has grown 7 times, from about 50 a year when we started to over 350 a year. And when we started, we only had 2 master's programs, MPP and MPM. Now we have 4 master's programs, MPP, MPA, MPM, and the Chinese language, MPAM, as well as a PhD program. The fourth fact is that nearly 80 countries have sent students to our school. In short, we have shared our education with about half the world's population who live in these 80 countries. We now have over 2,000 alumni in all corners of the world, and this is actually an amazing global footprint for a small new school like ours. And the footprint of our school becomes much larger if you include our executive education alumni, which are now over 10,000 strong. Now, having said this, let me emphasize that of the student alumni from our English language programs, the largest number is from Singapore. So we do actually educate a large number of Singaporeans in our school, and we have shared our virtues with our fellow Singaporean community too. The fifth fact is that we have the 3rd largest endowment of any school of public policy anywhere in the world. Only the long-established Harvard Kennedy School and the Woodrow Wilson School of Princeton can boast larger endowments. The 6th fact is that we are the 2nd most generous school of public policy in the entire world. We provide scholarships and financial aid to more than half of the students who come to the Lee Kuan Yew School. And only the Woodrow Wilson School is more generous than us globally. The 7th fact is that we have probably the most innovative public policy classroom in the world. Most schools of public policy teach the 3 disciplines of economics, politics, and public management in 3 different silos. We have been very bold and integrated them into one classroom with 3 different professors from 3 different disciplines teaching at the same time. And to the best of my knowledge, we may be the first in the world to do this. The eighth fact is that we do bold and innovative research at our school. And if you want proof, you'll see it this evening, because Minister Lawrence Wong will actually be launching 2 books. One will be The Big Ideas of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, based on the conference that we had. The other book is Governing Asia, which remarkably has got 38 essays from the professors and researchers at our school. And they have exposed their research passions with the rest of the world. Do enjoy the book and pick up a copy at the end of the day when you leave. The ninth fact is that when we were less than 5 years old, we were invited to help set up a school of public policy in another country. And then since 2010, we've been working closely with the government of Kazakhstan and the Nazarbayev University to establish the first graduate school of public policy in Central Asia. I think when we were set up in 2004, no one dreamt that within 5 years we'd be asked to set up a sister school of public policy in a Central Asian country. And the 10th fact is that we have world-class partners. We were the first Asian school to join the Global Public Policy Network. And since I'm sharing surprising statistics with you, let me share the one fact that truly impressed me as the dean. In fact, I was completely confounded when I first heard it, and this is the story. The University of Tokyo was founded in 1877. For 132 years, the university refused to sign a double degree with any university anywhere in the world. After 132 years, the University of Tokyo changed its mind and said, okay, the time has come to sign a double degree. And the first institution with which they signed a double degree was with the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and we were then 5 years old. So you can see it's an amazing journey that our school has taken in 10 years. And that's why I'm sharing all these facts with you. It's very difficult to describe how far our school has come in 10 years, but we hope these 10 facts give you an illustration of how far we have come and give you a glimpse of the long journey we have traveled. So I hope that the one big fact that you will take away from today's session, it is that it is possible, and this is an appropriate thing to say as we are going to celebrate our 50th anniversary in Singapore next year. And when we do so, I want to emphasize it is actually possible, as you look ahead, to dream big, even if you set up shop in a small country like Singapore. When we were set up, we were entrusted, as you know, with a very noble mission to educate and inspire current and future generations of leaders to raise the standards of governance in Asia. And I can tell you that we have come a very long way in 10 years in terms of fulfilling this noble mission. And of course, I want to thank all of you, the many supporters we have in this room, for having supported us on this great journey that we have taken. Now, let me talk briefly about my second point, about our 10th anniversary celebrations. And I think many of you know that to celebrate our 10th anniversary, we've had basically a year-long festival of ideas. And as a result of that, we've had amazing thought leaders and public personalities like Cass Sunstein, the co-author of Nudge, Chang Ha-jun, the author of 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, Margaret Heffernan, author of Willful Blindness, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Deputy Chairman of India's Planning Commission, Kevin Rudd, former Prime Minister of Australia, Justin Lin, former Chief Economist of the World Bank, Pascal Lamy, former Director General of WTO, Duvari Subbarao, the former Central Bank Governor of India, Lord Adair Turner, former Chairman of UK's Financial Services Authority. All of them and more have been speaking at our school just in this one past year to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And I'm really glad that we're having a great day to culminate the 10th anniversary celebrations. Many of you attended the breakout sessions. We will soon hear Mr. Giorgio, whom I'll introduce shortly. Then we will hear from Mr. Roger Cohen and Mr. Joe Stutwell in the second plenary session. And after that, I'll come back to the stage to chair the dialogue session with Minister Lawrence Wong for the final session. So all this brings me to the best part of my speech. It really gives me great pleasure for my third point to introduce our speaker, Mr. Giorgio, because he's really a dear personal friend and a good friend of the Lee Kuan Yew School also. As you all know, he served a distinguished career as a Singapore Cabinet Minister for 20 years and made major contributions in every ministry that he served in. He served as Singapore's Minister for Information and the Arts from 1991 to 1999, and in that capacity he made huge contributions to Singapore's arts and cultural scene. He oversaw the development of the Esplanade Theatres of the Bay and the new National Library. He also pushed for the use of Chinese dialects in the local film industry, paving the way for a generation of local film directors and producers. As the Information Minister, Mr. Yeo also correctly anticipated the importance of the Internet for Singapore, and throughout the 1990s, he pushed for the adoption of robust Internet infrastructure, arguing that it was critical for Singapore's position as a global hub. He also served as the Minister of Trade and Industry from 1999 to 2004, and as Minister for Trade and Industry, he was best known as the champion of Singapore's numerous free trade agreements with his trading partners. As Tomiko likes to say, the country that is the most promiscuous in free trade agreements is Singapore. This is a tradition, I guess, Mr. Giorgio that created. And he was a pioneer of FTAs at a time when progress on multilateral trade liberalization was stalling, and he played a central role in enabling FTAs with the United States, Japan, Australia, and several other countries, therefore opening up new economic space for Singapore regionally and globally. Since retiring from politics, Mr. Giorgio has joined the Kerry Group and is now chairman of Kerry Logistics, which operates in over 35 countries. In addition, he has been active in a number of global institutions. In March this year, he was named to the Vatican's new Council for the Economy by Pope Francis. He's also a member of the Foundation Board of the World Economic Forum, which runs Davos. He's a member of the Nicholas Berggruen Institute's 21st Century Council, as well as the International Advisory Board of the IESE Business School. He's also taken a very deep personal interest and plays an important role in reviving the ancient Buddhist university, Nalanda University in Bihar. Last and certainly not least, he has been a visiting scholar at the Lee Kuan Yew School since August 2011, and it's really been a pleasure to have him as a member of the school's community for the last 3 years, and I cannot think of a more appropriate person to launch our celebrations in this plenary hall than Mr. Giorgio. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Kishore, for the kind introduction. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is for me a great joy to join the school in celebrating its 10th anniversary. I owe a personal debt of gratitude to Kishore for offering me a perch after I lost the elections in May 2011. I decided to move on, but not to take on employment without a decent interval. He provided me with an offer to be a senior fellow in the school. I counter-proposed a deal that I'll be a visiting scholar without salary. He provides me a room and secretarial support, and I make myself available to teachers and students, but according to my own priorities. It has been a satisfactory arrangement. I asked him if he wanted the relationship to end. A few months ago, he said he's happy to see it continue. And before I left office that day, he shot me an email with a renewal offer, which I happily accepted. So Kishore, thank you for having me here today, and I'm so happy to see so many old friends in the audience. There's an air of uncertainty around us today, and it's at all levels. Things happening geopolitically, geoeconomically, things happening around us. Almost detectable mass unhappiness around the world. And also terrible things happening. Then when events happen, because of the way the global media, and now increasingly the social media, gives emphasis, the importance, the significance is blown out of all proportion. When tear gas was used in Hong Kong, I received many messages asking about my safety. In fact, the disturbances were highly localized. And that weekend, you could have still gone to Lam Kwai Fong, to the bars there, and not feel as if anything was happening. And on this side of Landmark, life went on as usual, but on the other side, there were barriers and things. But the way it went around the world, it seemed as if the whole of Hong Kong was in chaos, which of course it wasn't. And the role of the social media today has two sides to it. On the one hand, it keeps us all informed immediately. And emotionally, we are synchronized, syncopated. Something happens, one end of the world, the whole world feels it, throbs with it. It also distorts. And sometimes it is deliberately manipulated to achieve certain objectives. The beheading of Westerners by ISIS were not random acts of terror, in my view. I think they were designed to exploit the social media for political purposes. It's not easy to find the videos of the actual beheadings. They are gory. Because even though we don't like to say it, you have censorship, and censorship can be quite effective. And if you didn't have that censorship, I think the effects would be more far-reaching and uncertain. What is the objective of ISIS? Why this calculated mass terrorization of the Western world? I think it is to encourage country after country in the West to join the coalition, to recreate a 21st century crusade. We forget in the English language that crusade comes from the word crucifix. And in Arabic, it's called al-hurub al-salabiyah, the war of the cross. If in the Sunni world, there is a sense that the Christians are once again engaged in the crusade, then it will have an electric effect in the Sunni world. And I believe there is a deep purpose of what is happening. Are they achieving their intended purpose? I'm not sure. They may be, because in Western countries, recalling in horror and responding to public pressure, one after another, hands are raised to be part of the coalition. To say that ISIS is not Islamic describes it only at one level, because the flag they unfurl, and many of us have seen the flag they unfurl as they enter Kobani. It is, there's no God but Allah. And when they capture an area, the organizing principles all have their theology, the justification in Islamic teaching. Now this creates within the body, within the soul of Islam, a terrible struggle. And And even though the elites try to dismiss it as just an odd or an extreme phenomenon, in fact, the reverberations are deeper, which is why you have young men and women from all over the world for whom one can think of no logical justification, volunteering to be a part of this. Now, I'm talking about IESE only as an illustration of the impact the social media is having all over the world. The most profound impact is in the way hierarchies are being corroded by information technology, disintermediating what kept these hierarchies intact in the first place, sometimes by ignorance, sometimes by hypocrisy, sometimes by ritual, sometimes by selective information and disinformation. Today, in the past, a child could become an emperor because he's all dressed up, protected by courts, by music, by distance, and people bow. Today, the cameras are everywhere, the microphones are everywhere, and if you're not authentic, well, you'll be laughed at. The emperor has no clothes. This has changed relationships in a profound way between parents and children, between teachers and students, between doctors and patients, between priests and laity, between government leaders and voters. This intermediation of hierarchies has led to what I will call a crisis of institutions around the world. And the more pyramidal, the more elaborate Byzantine these institutions are, far away in Beijing, in Washington, in Brussels, in Tokyo, in Delhi, the less the public affection, because they are distant, oftentimes seen as self-serving, and disconnected. Self-serving classes of people absorbed in their own worlds. The instinct when there are cracks in an old structure is to repair those cracks. If the ceiling is falling, quickly shore it up. But if the ground itself is cracking, if the foundation is no longer bedrock, but a fragmented, cracked tectonic plate, then however one tries, eventually that structure will crumble. Will it crumble to anarchy? Will it crumble to a state of chaos? No, because if we recognize that these are the big shifts caused by technology, caused by the digital revolution, then we adjust accordingly. Today, I'm a doctor, the patient sees me, he's already Googled his symptoms, so you talk to him, even as you prescribe surgery or drugs to him, he's already Googling and asking you questions. If you as a doctor resents it, the patient loses respect for you and is off to the next doctor. If in the lecture room, the professor proclaims himself a know-all and gets irritated when difficult questions are asked, the students will lose all respect for him. And if we as parents handle our children in that way, there will be an immediate estrangement. And indeed, if one were to say, look, yes, the world has changed, and doctors can learn from patients, and teachers from students, and parents from their children, then we may all be better off. I joined Carrier Logistics Robert Kuan asked me to chair it, to list it. And of course, I know very little about carrier logistics. The people who are there have worked years of their lives. They have mastered freight, they've mastered the electronic industry, they've mastered food. And it will take me a whole lifetime to understand any one subject in detail. And indeed, I've come to the conclusion that whatever organization you head, you are likely to understand only a small fraction of it. You have to depend on others. And so I go around and I play the student. I ask questions. I ask for help. I ask how I can be helpful. And people respond. And you create an energy field where there are multiple nodes of activity, and you yourself constitutes only one node, hopefully a node which will grow in importance. Unfortunately, the bigger the institution, the greater the legacy, the harder it is to dismantle its core architecture, its core engineering, and to adjust to this new reality. It's easier if you are smaller. I think it is easier if you are cities like Hong Kong and Singapore to make the change because you have low inertia. And it's much easier if you are young. Because the young today instinctively live in the network world. There's no single pathway. There are always multiple pathways. It's like an MRT network, right? Point A to point B, well, there are many possibilities, many configurations which are possible. They're friends. The iPhone list, the apps. Harder for older people. In making the transition, being small helps, being younger helps. And for those of us who hope sometimes to make the transition, observing these two principles, demassification, engaging more younger people and learning from them, it'll be an easier transition. But for the world as it is, what we are seeing is still very much a destructive phase of old structures being brought down. Yes, new ones are being built up layer by layer on different assumptions, on different foundations, but it'll be some time before those new forms become dominant. And as in medieval times, the future was first to be discerned in the free cities. So the future, with all its uncertainties, is perhaps easiest to be discerned in the free cities today. And Singapore should aspire to be one such free city. It's already a free city in many ways. Hong Kong too. Let me put it starkly, that this transition is a big one, almost as dramatic as when human society shifted from a nomadic way of life to settled agricultural society, or when settled agricultural society in the feudal world industrialized. The transition will not be easy, because as in all such transitions, it has to take place at all levels of geopolitics, of geoeconomics, religious responses, family structures, extended tribal networks, all come under the same challenge. No one is spared. And as always, it is necessity which propels us forward, not intellectual choice. That the world is changing, so intellectually I decide to change the world and I change myself. That never happens. But because the alternative is far worse. Now, I remember years ago as a student reading Arnold Toynbee's study of history and how Egypt and Mesopotamia came about. He ascribed it to desiccation of the Sahara and the steppes. That when nomadic tribes were faced with the choice between starving or moving into the swamps with all its disease and snakes and dangers, to organize themselves, to drain the swamps and to move into agriculture, the alternative was much worse. And what will propel us forward is that the present situation today, in many areas of human life, is becoming less and less tenable. You take, say, this Ebola virus. I read a piece written by Kishore that for some time now, the World Health Organization has been underfunded. And so a problem which had been nipped in the bud is now growing and become more and more difficult to resolve. And I think we're in a sensitive phase now. If suddenly cases erupt in different parts of the world, the fear, the alarm will be amplified by the social media, and people will behave irrationally. Just a couple of months ago in Shanghai, there was a foreigner who suddenly collapsed and vomited on board the subway train, and instead of moving to help him, everybody dispersed, suddenly believing that that person was carrying Ebola. And you can't criticize people when they have such fears. We ourselves may react in the same way. We ourselves may already be reacting in the same way when anybody comes from Africa. And Africa is a continent 4 times the size of China. But, you know, human beings in the mass don't always behave rationally. So maybe I end here, Kishore, and have the rest of the time for Q&A. Thank you.
So let me begin by extrapolating your fascinating address about how the world is changing, about how there's an erosion of authority, and bring it all home to Singapore, and to say, how will this play out at the time when Singapore itself is going through a transition? How do you see its implications for Singapore society? I know it's a difficult question.
I have many colleagues in the audience, many former colleagues in the audience, so many members of parliament who are here, and I thank them for honoring me by their presence. Let me answer by talking about Hong Kong. Two Sundays ago,
By analogy.
when on Sunday night, before the deadline, because C.Y. Leong had drawn a line in the sand that by Monday morning, access to government offices and to schools must be opened up at all costs, by whatever means. There was an air of strange calm among the demonstrators. I was hosting Indonesian partners at the Shangri-La, and one of them had many years ago taken part in student demonstrations against Sukarno in Jakarta. So he expressed great interest, and I offered to bring him there with my Hong Kong colleague. So we had to cross a number of road dividers. And makeshift steps had been built. On top, one of them was a schoolgirl who offered her hand. One of my Indonesian friends saw the hand, looked into the hand, looked at the girl, and wondered what the hand was for. Was it to give him something? Was it to ask for something? So I said, no, that hand, take that hand so that you do not fall. You know, the students were so well organized, it was impressive. The place was clean. If your handphone ran out of battery, they would come with chargers, and then you return the chargers when you're through with them. I had withdrawn some cash in my pocket, and initially I thought, well, I better be careful. Then I thought, no, this is probably one of the safest places in Hong Kong. The civic consciousness was of such a high quality. I told myself that it must be second only to the Japanese. And I also ask myself whether in Singapore, our level of civic consciousness would be as high. My point is this: apart from the high politics, if at the atomic level you have good people who are responsible, who care for one another, I think upon these bricks you can build the most wonderful structures. But if the bricks are weak or crumble, then however you try, however brilliant the architect, nothing much is going to come out of it. So when I look at Hong Kong, I say, yes, there are problems, and the future is uncertain, and many things are not within their control. But there are good people, there are strong people, and they will survive. And if you ask me, Singapore, I think we have an additional advantage. I'm not sure if our civic consciousness is as high as young people in Hong Kong. But we have one additional advantage, which is our ability to operate in a diverse environment. Yes, I know we could be better. The way we treat foreigners, the way we treat minority races. I'm talking about the Chinese here. But I have, talking as an ethnic Chinese, I have mixed with ethnic Chinese around the world. And I think the Singaporean ethnic Chinese is the most multi-ethnic in its orientation. And that gives to Singapore a special quality in our ability to work in dense networks and be able to connect to different cultural domains and to turn it to our own economic advantage. So I've said this before, that ultimately what drives Singapore, what gives us our special quality, is our ability to arbitrage across cultures.
I'm just going to ask one more question, then I'm going to invite questions from the floor. You mentioned about the erosion of authority, and I completely agree with it. But yet, paradoxically, you take one of the oldest institutions in the world, the one that you know very well, the Catholic Church. It's actually quite remarkable. You have a new leader like Pope Francis, who came from nowhere and suddenly injected a new vigor and dynamism to the Catholic Church. So at a time when there's erosion of authority globally, he's able to provide new leadership and drive to one of the oldest institutions. What's his secret?
He's a remarkable leader, and I'm greatly privileged to be able to serve in the Vatican. I think he reminds us all the time of what is basic and what is fundamental. I remember earlier this year in Davos, he was invited to attend. He could not. He sent a cardinal to deliver a message and to remind everybody that while it is good to talk about big things and to talk about the economy and business and growth and prosperity, please don't forget what is at the heart of it all, which is a human being. And the human being, not in his perfect form, who is clever and wealthy and creative, but the human being with all his frailties, to respect him for what it is. Because if we lose that fundamental quality, then everything else will lead to its own negation. It's a moral view of life. There was a time when we thought that laws and the market alone could solve all human problems. And there were econometrists who worked out perfect market models and said, look, if you do this and you do that, then you maximize everybody's utility. You only have to be selfish and work for yourself. And the market will work its magic and we'll all be better off. Forgetting that Adam Smith himself was a moral philosopher. And sometimes in our impatience to get on in life, to take advantage, we forget what is happening. And today, technology has altered the terms of trade against ordinary people in the middle classes. People who are hardworking, responsible, family-centered, finding that despite all they do, the system is somehow turning against them because they're being replaced by foreigners, they're being replaced by computers, they're being replaced by algorithms. And however hard they try, their worth goes down. And the older you are, the more it goes down. And it overturns all assumptions, all expectations. And this is creating tremendous angst, including in Singapore. The immediate political response is, well, let's redistribute. So you tax. And you try to tax in a clever way. But there are even cleverer people in the financial world, in the corporate world, who will figure out how to tax plan. And if your exactions are too severe, capital will flow out, talent will flow out, because any number of people are prepared to accept. The terms of trade have turned against a lot of people in the middle classes. And so they resent it. Why is it at the top, a minority are getting wealthier? Piketty has written about capital and how if you have capital or privileged networks, or you're very smart, you become very wealthy. And I meet so many young people, very bright young people in the financial world, and they move paper. And suddenly, great fortunes are to be made. Whereas in my company, logistics, it's all hard work, right? You move things around, you earn small margins. So I ask myself,
Are you in the wrong business?
what's happening? And it's only a matter of time before, because people seek simple explanations. And there'll be many suppliers of simple explanations, which are not the real answers, and which will create even more problems. My own belief, and we can talk about it if you wish, is that the old democracy, the old socialism of the 20th century, involving large numbers, no longer work. You've got to bring it down to a level where people feel a sense of community. In other words, if I have, in a famine situation, 100 kilograms of rice, and I have to decide whom to share it with, my wife, my children, my extended family, my neighbors, my cousins, my friends, my co-religionists, fellow Singaporeans, ASEAN members, the world. How do I share?
100 kilograms, not enough.
How do I share the grains of rice? Because that decision reflects your inner construction and your sense of being a human being. And if the largest system is based not on this, but on some abstract principle that human beings all over the world are equal, I think we'll fail. Democracy and socialism are in our DNA, but it's got to be worked at the right level.
Okay, I see Anthony is going to have a question. Anthony, introduce yourself to the audience and then quick, sharp question. Yes.
My name is Anthony Teo. I'm a senior citizen.
With a pioneer generation.
Pioneer generation. Minister Yo.
Please don't call me Minister Yo.
Scholar.
Scholar Yo. Yeah. Now, I think you pose the perfect dilemma of change and continuity, and the case you make for change. But you just written recently on continuity. And it's quite amazing because you compare the Communist Party and the Catholic Church. And your thesis is there are not too many dissimilarities. And there is some degree of a form of democracy. And so some people think in the Catholic Church, the Pope appoints the cardinals and the cardinals appoint the Pope. There is some logic in it. The issue here is if new forms of democracy turn up, like Sukarno says, is guided democracy, or our friend from Egypt, Nasser, talks about constitutional democracy. what sort of frame do they fall into? Do they fall into the same frame that you're talking about in terms of the change and continuity?
To me, there's only one test: how they treat ordinary human beings. If in the name of some large ideal, you are cruel to individuals, and you are constantly trampling upon their rights in the service of a so-called larger interest, I think that system is evil. And that's what happened to communism. And for the Catholic Church, why is Francis doing all this? Is to bring us all back to Jesus Christ and the apostles. They call him a communist, and he laughed and said, I don't consider it an insult. What the communists did was to take Christianity and remove God from it. But more than that, it created nomenclatura, which became a self-serving class of people. And Mao unleashed the Cultural Revolution to remove that class. It created even more problems. And Xi Jinping is quite determined to restore the moral foundations of the Chinese Communist Party. And if he succeeds, then China will succeed. But if the moral foundations are weak, however clever your policies are, you will eventually crumble. So I would, to me, the big isms have only one test, which is how does it treat human beings?
I have a question here from the other room. The question is, how will Singaporean capitalism deal with the rising calls in Singapore for populist welfarism in the future, which is growing?
For as long as Singaporeans think that the government is rich, they will say, look, come on.
Give me more.
Pass some over. But in fact, we have nothing. We have only a small island. We have no natural endowments. And what we have, I do not know how many billion dollars we have, even if you double it. What is that compared to what others have? In the ground, in land, underwater. And in the crisis, if we have nothing, how do you sustain a diaspora? So yes, there must be a sense that the ordinary needs of Singaporeans have got to be looked after. And a proper balance between spending on the generation today and saving for future generations. So that balance is a political balance. And the government now is retweaking that balance, recalibrating it, fearing to go too far because that will consume itself, but knowing that if it doesn't proceed enough, then there's no deal in the first place. So I can't comment specifically. In the end, it is a political challenge which every generation of Singaporeans will have to contend. But we are practical people. I mean, people here, they know you don't work. Yes, people can give you charity, but it's only worth so much. In the end, you've got to provide a service to the world. And there's so many Singaporeans who travel, who work overseas. They know it's a harsh world, that if you don't study hard, if you don't save, you'll be in trouble. So whatever the complaints, whatever the calls for government to give more, if you watch the individual behavior of Singaporeans and how parents raise their children and the industriousness of the young people, I think we are okay. Because it is a practical view of the world and they know that if I don't get a good education, I'll be in trouble. And I better save for a rainy day.
Thank you. This, Joe, you want to ask a question? Go ahead. Can you go to the microphone, Joe? Do you mind? And then I'll turn to you after that, please. Yeah. Joe is going to be speaking in the next panel, by the way.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be asking a question, but you're easygoing. I think a point of information, I mean, on this endowments thing, George, you know, you've got the best natural harbour in the region and you're in the most strategic geographic location. That's a hell of an endowment. So the argument that Singapore doesn't have natural endowments is just wrong, I think. But the question I want to ask is on this and you're right, don't do harm to others in the name of a greater good. Something that I'm interested in, and I want to ask you your personal opinion, not representing anybody but yourself. When is Singapore going to stop hanging people?
Well, if you put the death penalty to a referendum, I think the majority of Singaporeans would prefer keeping the death sentence in our law books. Will that change one day? It could. I'm not sure. But this is really for Singaporeans to decide. And maybe there'll be new techniques of penal management which enables us to achieve the same effect without having to take the ultimate step. When that comes, people will think differently. So there's nothing sacrosanct or doctrinal about it. I don't think we hang out of vindictiveness, but it's done as a deterrent. In Islam, it is prescribed. In the US, it is the popular will. In China, it's been a part of the system from the beginning of time. So, well, if others change, I'm sure we too will eventually change. But we're not likely to lead that change in the world, unlike the Europeans. Your question about Singapore's natural endowment, in an age of maritime power, yes, Singapore's position at the turning point where the trade winds come and go was critical. But there's so many islands at this junction. Any one of them could have provided that service. Raffles decided between Karimun, an island in Indonesia, and Singapore. He chose Singapore. So history could have dealt with us quite differently. And if you look at the future, you look at the way China is integrating its region, they are going to create multiple bypasses around the Straits of Malacca. And we've got to accept that. We're not going to change the world, we've accepted it for what it is. For air traffic, Singapore is in fact in a disadvantaged position because we're too far south compared to Bangkok and Hong Kong. So we've got to make the best of what we have. And it is, well, not bad, not that great either.
Okay. Over there, please go ahead, yes.
Hi, Mr. Yeo. My name is Zhen Yi. Thank you for sharing your insights on the current happenings in the world. And I hear what you said just now about the disintermediation of authority and how it has changed relationships at all levels, including the government and its voters. And I extrapolate it a little bit to the public service and the public and the change of relationship there. So my question is, how should the public service reorientate itself in serving an increasingly networked public in future?
If I can go back to Pope Francis, he observes the Jesuit principle of insertion.
Say that again.
Of insertion.
Insertion.
Yeah, that you must insert yourself into the community, into the problem, the way Jesus Christ did, in order to understand it holistically and to effect change from within. You cannot be a bureaucratic sitting on high, reading papers, doing statistical analysis, and prescribing solutions. The Singapore Civil Service is already the best, probably the best administration in the world today. And the reason why the LKY School...
We can quote you on that, right?
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to say it now. In fact, the reason why the LKY School has been able to grow so rapidly in the last 10 years is because of the story of Singapore. But given the nature of the world today and the challenge of technology and the digital revolution, we must do it even more and insert ourselves into the daily lives of Singaporeans. Then whatever we do, we will know the full effects of and we'll be able to achieve our purposes in a better way. It's very important that those who are in charge do not lead and live separate lives. And to the extent that we can be one community, we'll be a strong society.
Can I just take one question from another room, just to be fair?
Yes.
It says, would you situate the current crisis with the Islamic State, IS, as a crisis of institutions as you have described? And if so, what is the current approach to resolving the crisis? Is the current approach to resolving the crisis an appropriate one? What's your answer to IS?
ISIS cannot succeed militarily. It's not possible because technologically they're primitive. Even if they can assemble a significant foreign contingent with the knowledge, I don't see them having the full array of military equipment and systems to fight. And for any power to prevail, it must solve two problems. One is it must be able to fight, it must be able to produce. And I think on both counts, there's a limit to what ISIS can do. So it's a matter of time before it is put in its proper place. But it doesn't mean that the problems of the Middle East will be resolved. And my own fear is the problem of ISIS is a malignancy in global Islam. A worse mutation than Al-Qaeda. And what we see in ISIS is only a metastasis of that malignancy. So surgery can remove it. But the problem is in the system. It's not just in ISIS, and it can recur elsewhere. And yes, every time it recurs, whether it's Boko Haram or whatever, you can do something. But unless you find a way to resolve it in the system, somehow invoking a form of immunotherapy, I think this problem will be reversed for a long time. When September 11 happened, we found to our dismay that there was a local network operating through the Jama'ah Islamiyah. And in the end, our hand was forced because one of the members was arrested in Afghanistan, and they knew that that cover, that we would know about the network. So before they could dive deep in Singapore, we arrested them. And the authorities didn't quite know what to do with them because they were living in their own mental universe. So they got a few ulamas to go in to talk to them. And the ulamas initially were very suspicious, wondering, why are you associating us with them? Are you saying that we are somehow connected? But anyway, they were persuaded and they agreed grumpily. So they went in and they met them, these detainees, over many sessions. And they had not only verbal exchanges, they had written exchanges. And after a while, our ulama said, they are invoking Islam for everything they do. Something has gone wrong in Islam in Singapore. And when they went back to their own religious schools and talking to their own religious communities, word went around that something bad has happened and that they must be watchful and take countermeasures. So in a small, limited way, we developed an immune system in Singapore. Now, where the good cells identify the malignant cells, confine and attack them. And to me, in all the places in the world where there are problem spots, using Christian armaments to defeat Muslim malignancy will only make the malignancy worse in the long term. And therefore, conceptually, for surgical operations, yes, you may need Western implements. But in terms of treating the problem in a deep way, this problem has got to be resolved within the Ummah itself, within the world of Islam itself. And in this really battle for the soul of Islam, what happens in Al-Azhar, what happens in Iran, what happens in the madrasas in Damascus and in Medina and elsewhere will matter. And all of us who are non-Muslims have a vested interest in the good health of the Islamic community and should be supportive of them in whatever way we can, knowing at the same time that what we do is at best a supportive effort.
Please, our student from Myanmar, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yo. Good afternoon, Mr. Dean. My name is Lin. I'm a MBB student from LKY School of Public Policy. I want to know about what are your secrets of success in your life, because you have been working for many years in as ministers in many ministries. And I'm very interested in trade policy and foreign policy, and how foreign policy and trade policy contribute to Singapore's success today. Thank you.
Yeah, he wants to become the foreign minister of Myanmar. So can you advise him how to become?
I try wherever I am to be of some use to people around me. And that will give me enormous satisfaction. We are only for a brief period what we are. From dust, we return to dust. During the period when we are whole, let the world remember us for our contributions and not wish that we had not existed. So whether we do big things or small things, it doesn't matter. Make a difference and make it bettable.
That's your answer. Okay, before I come to you, Gillian, let me take a question. I'll go to Gillian. There's a question in the other room. Minister, you seem... Oh, I shouldn't call you minister, sorry. Scholar.
George is absolutely
George is
fine.
better.
It happens to be my name.
No, sorry, I'm just reading the verbatim. You seem to be suggesting that censorship is a necessary evil. Do you think China will need censorship to maintain stability?
No, all of us censor, whether we say it or not. It's a matter of degrees of censorship and the subtlety with which it's accomplished. I remember once on my Facebook posting stunning images of the Hadramaut Rift Valley, which I visited. And there were pictures taken from a balloon or an aeroplane. I didn't understand the words, they were all in Arabic. So I posted it, it reminded me of my visit with Arab Singaporeans to Hadramaut. And mysteriously, a few weeks later, it disappeared. And I tried to check, gone. Who removed it? I don't know. But there are obviously people who monitor these things and make them work. And that's fine to me. I don't believe in cyberspace becoming an all-encompassing space without barriers, because cyberspace can achieve good, can achieve evil, and all of us will seek to protect ourselves. We're all connected. Every cell in our body is connected to each other. We're connected in a biological sphere. But the key to life is the ability to separate the inside from the outside, and therefore to cellularize and to separate two spaces by semi-permeable membranes. The Snowden disclosures have, of course, accentuated it. But I have no doubts in my mind that if you look at cyberspace today, the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, the Germans, the Brazilians all create their own separate universes. They're all porous, but where it is important to them, they will achieve controls. And even as individuals now, those who can provide us software so that we can protect some of our privacy, such software will become very popular and marketable. So this cellularization of the internet space, the way the biological space is cellularized, to me is an inevitable development. It will impede efficiency to a point, but it will also greatly reduce infection. And it will enable different communities to maintain their own sense of self. And that's powerful.
Okay, Gillian, then I'll come to you, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yeo. It's always inspiring to listen to you. My question has to do with your point about how we have an advantage as Singaporeans in terms of the arbitrage that's needed because we have the cultural wherewithal, a point you made just now. So just to extend that argument and talking about the future, are there ways in which we can emphasize and highlight and build on this interoperability? And there are 2 points I'd like to get your views on. What are the things that hold us back from reforming our mother tongue policy in order to allow Singaporeans to choose what second language they would like to take up, or rather their parents would like them to take up? in schools. The point being that, then there won't be special provision needed for Chinese to learn Malay, or for Malays to learn Chinese, or Indians to learn Chinese, or whatever, so that we can operate and play more easily in Asia and Southeast Asia, which relates to the second part, which is what, by your understanding, are the things that hold us back from reforming the SAP system, the SAP school system, so that SAP schools can then also welcome children of all ethnic backgrounds to take up the second language at a higher level, whether it's in Chinese, Malay, or Tamil, or eventually Hindi. So what do you think are the barriers to us becoming even more, to highlight and emphasize our interoperability in this changing world that requires us to be able to play everywhere, at all times, in every manner? Thank you, Mr. Yeo.
You mentioned parents deciding on their children's behalf the languages they should master. For indeed, learning a language is an investment of a lifetime and reflects a view of the world. It is very important. So parents decide for their children. Because if you don't pick up a language when you're young, picking it up when you're an adult is very difficult. So I don't subscribe to the view that the government should not somehow have a view on this. Because schools have got to be built, teachers have got to be trained. So in order for parents to be allowed to give effect to their choices, a whole infrastructure, a menu of choices must already be available, and it cannot be an infinite menu. So governments have got to take decisions. And there are consequences for 2 generations down. You may quarrel with particular policies, and in any society there can be a very rational debate about this. And Singapore will have this debate interminably, because language is such an important issue and so close to our hearts, because as the Malay say, Bahawa Jiwa Bangsa, that language is the soul of a community. So it is so bound up with a sense of self. And because it is bound up with a sense of self, respecting a language is respecting the self in the individual, in the community. And if you cut a person off from his language, he loses a large part of his past and a large part of his cultural moorings. We are very diverse in Singapore. You go into a hawker center and you just be still and listen to the cacophony. Then you say, yes, this is Singapore. It is not the Singapore that you see on television, where each channel is monolingual. It is a Singapore which is constantly, incessantly, insistently multilingual, not only between sentences, but within sentences, in the actual syntax itself. Mind you, it makes it more difficult for us to learn English or Chinese to a high level. But we understand each other. And sometimes, to establish our emotional connections, all of us will switch occasionally to Singlish in order to make a point that we belong to a community. So this is the complex situation that we are in. You ask for simple answers. There are no simple answers. This is a cauldron constantly on the boil. And the key to it is this, that even as we bring in newcomers into our midst, and I know right now there's a certain resistance to too many newcomers coming in, our respectfulness to them is very important. I used to have to give out citizenship certificates to new citizens when I was an MP. And I would always give the same speech with different words, which is that it doesn't matter where you come from. You can be from Myanmar, you can be from England, you can be from Timbuktu. That link is precious to us. And please preserve your heritage, please preserve your language. We'll try to accommodate you as much as we can, but it has to be practical. and we are enhanced by it. But there's one additional requirement to be a Singaporean, that wherever you're from, whatever ethnic group you belong to, when you come to Singapore, your heart must be a little bit bigger, your mind must be a bit broader to accommodate those who are different from you. If you can do that, you're a Singaporean. That is always the speech I give to new Singaporeans. And if this is our deep philosophy, a big-hearted and a broad-minded Singapore, it is something which is something to be proud of.
As usual, we get questions always when you're about to finish. Let's take the last two questions together, and then we'll finish on time at 2:30. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yeo. My name is Kei Chong. I'm an alumnus from the school. I'd like to ask a question about the Singapore's future in the next 20 years. Given the fact that for the past 49 years, Singapore has developed itself in many areas, technology, education, military, etc., etc. And we've created many miracles for the past 49 years. So I'd like to ask, in your view, for the next 20 years, can we continue to create such miracles? Thank you.
Okay, can I just take the other question too? Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Actually, my question is somewhat similar. George just now mentioned the fact that a lot of the middle class are getting quite concerned about automation to the point where, jobs are being replaced by technology, artificial intelligence, essentially. There was a book published earlier this year called The Second Machine Age, I believe, in which the two MIT people talked about, AI, self-driving cars. You don't need taxi drivers anymore in Singapore. I mean, some might like that, some might not like that, actually. But you get situations like self-driving cars, you get things like Watson, where doctors not necessarily are going to be replaced, but they're going to be supplemented or complemented. So the question is, the solution that has been posited, that has been put up with respect to AI is more education. But in Singapore, has one of the best education systems at this point. So you have diminishing marginal returns. So what can Singapore do in light of the fact that you have artificial intelligence that's going to challenge a lot of the middle class jobs? Even law jobs, legal jobs are being challenged in the US. Discovery is being replaced by technology in the US, in the US right now. Not necessarily doctors, but medical technicians to some extent are, and as I mentioned, also self-driving cars. So let's say for the next 50 years, what can Singapore do with respect to upgrading, reskilling, upskilling its population, such that AI is not going to really challenge the middle class jobs? Any thoughts from you will be greatly welcome. Thank you. By the way, George.
To summarize the two questions, how do we ensure the next 50 years are as good as the first 50 years?
That's correct. Thank you.
Singapore is not intelligible in itself. It's like one of those species which have adapted to an environment where, to understand that particular species form, because to understand the environment. And what's our environment? Our environment is Asia. We rely astride the maritime Silk Road. That is the lifeblood running through our body. It ebbs, it flows, we're with it. And if you ask yourself, what will Asia look like 20 years from now? Would there be peace? Would there be development? I think there's a fair chance that there will be peace. We don't have time today to talk about the Sino-US relations or Sino-Japan relations. The US will be an inseparable part of Asia in the next 20 years. The way Asians interact with one another will be based not on an Indian operating system or a Chinese operating system, but on a US operating system. The intellectual categories, the assumptions will be largely American ones. And it's not at all surprising because without the millions of Asians who went to study in America and absorb this knowledge and these intellectual categories, what we see in Asia will not happen. So I don't see a necessary conflict between China and the US. Yes, the US has a certain missionary self-conception, so it wants others to be American. I think it's very difficult. China, on the other hand, has no wish to make others like them. If China were a missionary power like the Soviet Union, then I think a clash is inevitable because everybody will be an arena of contest. But China has no wish to turn non-Chinese into Chinese. So if the Americans want to turn others into Americans, so long as it doesn't impinge upon China, China said, well, it's up to you. That's the Chinese position. And between India and China, will there be conflict in the next 20 years? Yes, there's a border dispute. Yes, the 62 war left a deep scar in India, which is still not fully healed. But I notice now in India, an increasing number of the intelligentsia coming to the conclusion that the 62 war was in fact provoked by Nehru. The account given by Neville Maxwell in his book. There is a report which is still kept classified. But yes, the word has gone around that in fact it's not as people thought in the past, that Mao Zedong egregiously crossed the line of control to give India a bloody nose. If that was Mao Zedong's intention, but he moved back to the line of control. In the 60s and 50s, 60s and 70s and 80s, China under Mao, under Zhou Enlai, under Deng Xiaoping said, well, let's just settle on a line of control, Aksai Chin for Arunachal Pradesh. India said no. Now India says, maybe. China says no, that Tawang will be part of China. Why Tawang? Because Tawang was where I think the 6th Dalai Lama reincarnated, and I think they're afraid that the Dalai Lama will choose to reincarnate there and torment China for one more lifetime. But now the Dalai Lama says there's no need for him to reincarnate, so maybe a solution will be found out of it. But on the Chinese side, if you talk to the ordinary Chinese, and there was a war in 62, most of them will look at you in a very puzzled way. Was there a war with India? I mean, for them, India is chaotic, it's messy, but India was where the sutras came from. India was where Xuanzang went and came back and brought Buddhism, which became fully digested and a part of Chinese society. So I think there's a fair chance there won't be war between the US and China. I don't see war between China and India. And in between Southeast Asia, if we stay together, which I think there's a good chance we will, this half of the world will be the happier half of the world. And Singapore is right in the middle of it. And if there's an endowment to talk about, this is the endowment. That we are in the center of the region where there is a lot of hope for half of humanity. And how do we prosper? By inserting ourselves into it, by contributing to this multifaceted network. And we are small, we need only a few tiny crumbs to enjoy a good life in Singapore and to make this a wonderful place. So I'm optimistic. Then the fear whether technology will somehow, it's a Luddite view, right? That the machine takes over our work and in the end becomes our master. It will be a long time before artificial intelligence will surpass the human brain. And if we teach our children only by rote to do things which are repetitive, which are replaceable, then we're not preparing them well. I think it's very important in this new age to be able to cross domains, both disciplinary domains, across the sciences, between the sciences and the arts, and they're all gray areas, and across cultural domains. Because inter-domain boundaries are the most difficult to codify, and therefore the least likely to be replaceable by machines or to be outsourced. So the arts are important. Culture is important. How to be a human being, how to interact with people who are different from you. If you have a Muslim friend, what do you do? If this is Yom Kippur, what do you do? If you are vegetarian, a Buddhist vegetarian, not a Hindu vegetarian, what does it mean? And if from a young age we internalize all these things so that it's almost natural to us, we'll always be able to find value to the world around us.
You know, one of the key goals of our 10th anniversary celebrations was to ensure that we gave you a lot to reflect on. And I'm sure you will all agree that in this session, George has given us an enormous amount to reflect on. And I'm sure we can come back 10 years from now. He'll still be a visiting scholar at the Lee Kuan Yew School, and we'll have another round of reflection. So thank you very much, George.